Downhill bikes are at the cutting edge of mountain bike technology. You've only got to look at how hard the pros push these bikes, and they help develop them, to know that every single millimetre of these bikes have been thought about, from geometry to suspension. So, they come at a certain price, as you'd expect. A good downhill bike costs quite a bit of money, but how much slower is a ratty old downhill bike? All right, the modern downhill bike is a Nukeproof Descent 297, which means it's got a 29er wheel up front, 27.5 on the rear, so mixed wheel size. You didn't get that back in the day. So you've got the rollover from the front wheel, so it doesn't get all those small bumps, great for that. But then the maneuverability of a smaller rear wheel, which is still bigger than the one on the cheap downhill bike coming up. 200mm of travel, front and rear. Got a hydroformed alloy frame. Actually, you've got adjustable main pivot on this bike, which you can choose the sort of suspension characteristics. Basically, like having air volume spacers, you know, changing the progressivity, is that a word? But of a coil shock. You can't normally do that with a coil shock. Big brakes, got a 220mm rotor up front with these big SRAM 4-pot code stoppers on there. So, good suspension, good brakes. Size-wise, that's the biggest difference in this and the old bike. Actually, it's not crazy by modern geometries. This is a medium frame. It's got a 440mm reach, so not huge by any means. It's got a 63-degree head angle. All right, this is the cheap downhill bike, a Da Vinci Wilson from about 2009, we think. So this bike cost 550 English pounds. Compared that to the 1 penny under £5,000 that the Nukeproof Descent is worth, shows you just how much cheaper. It's like a tenth of the price. You might recognise this bike from the cheap downhill bike challenge where I rode it, and I kind of, if you remember, if you've seen it, I raved about how good I thought it was for 500 quid. It's a really good bike. But now what we will see, we're going to put it against the clock, see if it's slower, how much it is slower, how it feels, to be fair, as well. Because, you know, like I said at the time, this, I think, is a good bike park bike. For hitting jumps and stuff, it's great. I think against the clock, we might see some of its weaknesses. It's got a 67-degree head angle. Compare that to the 63 on the Descent. I don't feel like that's going to help it. It's got 26-inch wheels, which probably all right. I don't think they're going to be as fast, but they're going to be manoeuvrable in the trees, shall we say. 203mm of travel, so I've got 3mm extra, front and rear. I've got smaller brakes. I've got a mismatch of brakes, actually. They kind of work. Everything on this bike works. It's just a bit ratty and a bit rattly compared to the new bike. So it's going to be interesting. All right, time on the new bike first. Okay, I survived, as did the Da Vinci. That bike is 13 years old, from 2009. Coincidentally, that's the year I finished racing downhill. So the biggest difference between the two bikes, obviously the wheel size I've talked about already, but the Da Vinci is actually 10 centimeters shorter on the wheelbase, which does make a massive difference on how stable the bike feels. 26-inch wheels, it's got a 67-degree head angle, and it's 6 pounds heavier, which is definitely noticeable, 42 pounds over 36. But on to the times. Well, the Nuke Proof Descent did a 4 minutes 34.5. Da Vinci Wilson, 4 minutes 39, so 4.5 seconds slower, which is 1.6%, obviously not a huge amount. So for £4,450, you get about 5 seconds. Of course, if you're racing, which is what those downhill bikes are for, then 4.5, 5 seconds will make a massive difference. At a World Cup, that can make a difference between winning and being outside the top 10. If you're not racing and you're not so worried about the seconds, then you can save yourself a whole load of money. And for me, that 26-inch wheel bike felt amazing in the air. It might have been the wheelbase as well. It just felt like I could really throw it around, whip it. On the ground, I could definitely feel the age of the bike. It's a bit rattly. The back end was moving around, so it didn't feel that good. And it didn't feel as stable. It didn't feel like I could push it as hard. Even on the corners, I know longer wheelbase doesn't necessarily help you in corners, but it felt way more stable. So it is slower on the cheap bike, but not a huge amount. Let me know in the comments down below. If you fancy riding an old 26-inch bike park shredder, like I mentioned in the cheap downhill bike challenge, I would love a bike like that just for riding on jumps and stuff. But if you're not worried about going fast, then a cheap old downhill bike is amazing. But if you like new bikes, if you like new kit, then that newer, more expensive bike is going to be faster.